Hi friends, in today's video we're going to be talking about states of emergency and national emergencies. It's going to be a very interesting chat. I sure hope that everything I'm saying is being recorded. It looks like it is. It looks like it's going good so far. That's exciting because I always have difficulties at the beginning of these live streams. But here we go. For those of you who don't know, before we get started, this is a LLPS, which is, I guess, the name that I'm going with for when I talk about governments and policy and politics from a humanistic point of view. I'm probably going to do these either Friday nights or Thursday nights. I'm not entirely sure. But this is something that I'm trying to do because it seems like, one, there's a lot of humanist interest in politics and policy because we're a very solid bunch. Like, we're interested in policy, we're interested in justice, we're interested in government. But now, as I write and do a lot more stuff like this, it's a good sign that more and more of us take this stuff seriously and are ready to get involved and figure out how we can help make our system better. But for those of you who don't know, the government shutdown is just a few hours away from becoming the longest ever government shutdown in United States history. At the very least, the last and longest one since the 1970s. And that is disastrous. That means that there's a whole lot of money that's been lost. It doesn't look like the government shutdown is anywhere close to ending, which means that it's going to be going on for a longer period of time than usual. And that means that even more money is going to be lost, which is incredibly frustrating. And partially because of that, this is going to be a different live stream. Towards the end of this live stream, when I've said all the stuff I feel like I need to say about national emergencies and states of emergencies, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to try to change this up. Hey, Terry. Hey, Lady Unicorn. Hey, Purple Rhymes with Orange. Boy, the thing that I was using to watch my chat just decided to break up on me. I have my iPad over to the side, so if you see me looking down at that, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make sure that I can see the chat and also see my notes at the same time. Fun task. I don't know if I would recommend people do it the way that I do it, but this way I can also see myself. I can see what I look like in the corner without having to look at the actual live projection, which is distracting in a whole different direction. But what I'm going to try to do once I've spoken for about 30 or so minutes, I'm going to not stop this live stream, but I'm going to put an end to the discussion on national emergencies and state of emergencies, and I'm going to open things up to people. I'll do a little intermission where I just chat about random stuff while I send out invites to the actual Google Hangout. So if you are interested in jumping on and chatting with me, let me know in the comment section, send me tweets, because I also have Twitter pulled up. But that is just all of the formal analytical stuff, all of the background stuff. Now we're going to really dive into the meat of this. The president announced earlier today that he is thus far backing off declaring a state of emergency, which is, I would argue, a good thing, and it's also not surprising. But at the end of the day, states of emergencies are really big legislative and political weapons that presidents have access to. And that's something that people need to be aware of. And the reality is, in schools, people are taught only the bare basics about national emergencies and state of emergencies. We are not taught their history. We're not taught how it was that they were started to be contained, because right now, the way states of emergencies work is vastly different than the way that it did before, I'm going to say, about 1973. Right now, there's a whole process, and states of emergency, at the very least at the federal level, are contained and curtailed. And it's really important that people realize that. Also, I'm really glad that the chat is really lively today. That's exciting. Hey, everyone. There's some new folks who heard me for the first time, or for one of the first times, yesterday over on Mrs. Snarky's channel, where Mrs. Snarky, Godless Iowan, and I talked about capitalism. That's super exciting. I'm super happy to see two new voices, one of whom I know has already mentioned being interested in coming on to the after party / little panel discussion that we're doing. I'm experimenting with this type of live stream, so forgive me if there are going to be moments when this is a rough format. But as always, I'm always open to having discussions about how it is that I do stuff like this. I don't want to end this particular stream and create a new one for the after party, because I feel like the after party / panel discussion is equally important, whereas normally the after parties are just like a fun thing that we do when we talk about chill topics. But then, since this is so serious, and I would argue disastrous, it's really important that we actually have a conversation about this. And it's cool if you guys can't do today's after party / panel discussion. That's fine. This is definitely unusual. I feel like because this is such a trending topic, I wanted to talk about this and involve other people's voices. And this is definitely a way to do that. I don't know if it's like the ideal way, but I mean, it's a way that gets the job done. So in order for us to start talking about the history of national emergencies, we should know that kind of since the beginning, national emergencies have been a thing that the president has the power to declare, but they weren't used as a weapon until, they weren't used in any real capacity until the 20th century. And that's part of the reason why they went so long without being really like criticized and scrutinized. And the power went relatively unchecked. In fact, the thing that actually changed that was the Korean War. Specifically, there was a state of emergency declared by President Harry S. Truman that was never undeclared or ended. So in 1972, the Senate began to question this, and they began to really look into it. They announced a special committee, which is something that I'm going to be talking about in next week's live stream, although next week's live stream's date is not set in stone yet. But that's a thing I'll talk about later. So there was a special committee that was convened by the Senate and resulted in an investigation into the powers that come with a state of emergency and also into active states of emergency. And it turned out that in 1972, there were 4 active states of emergency, including the one that was declared because of the Korean War. So after that, the Senate decided that that was way too much power and also no oversight that was being given to one of the president's potentially most important powers. So it was something that really needed to be changed. And there was a call to investigate all of the powers that the president had in the state of emergency, and also ways that they could constitutionally and legally curtail and contain those powers. And the ultimate end result of that was the National Emergencies Act, which was signed in 1976. I actually didn't write the year of that off the top of my head. I really should have. But it was, at least as far as I know, 1976. I'll definitely go back and check that. I'll correct it in the comment section if I am wrong about that. But what that bill did was it contained substantially a lot of the president's powers when it came to a state of emergency. And among other things, it made it so that a state of emergency would automatically end in a year if the state of emergency was still ongoing and there was no call to renewal. There was no way to renew it. And fortunately, the bill also established a way to renew states of emergency. So that way, if the president needed the state of emergency to continue, if it was an uncontroversial state of emergency, which many states of emergency have been. In fact, most states of emergency were not particularly political. They weren't particularly fought over either. They were just things that the president declared and people sort of got in line. Now, there were conversations about a handful of them, especially the last 3, all of which have been done by President Trump, and all of which have been discussed to some extent, but at least up until this potential one, haven't been super fought. They've been mostly just sort of accepted. They were criticized, but despite the fact that Congress actually does have the power to bring an end to a state of emergency, no one really called to try and end them, which is one of the things that was established by the National Emergencies Act. So what I'm talking about here is the fact that there is a process in the State of Emergency Act. Sorry if I sort of chopped out there. For some reason, my internet's a little bit choppy, but should be fine. If I start to robot, let me know. That's definitely a thing that happens on some of my live streams. But with the National Emergencies Act, what could happen is that Congress could check every 6 months. They could gather together and they could hold a vote. Both chambers would vote to see if the national state of emergency should be revoked. And that was a really useful power. It's a shame that Congress doesn't use it, because even for presidents that I like, and even for people who I agree with, I think that this is a powerful thing that people should be doing, because it's really important. Like, it's a very substantial check on the president's power that you'd think would be really useful, since people on both sides of the aisle talk a whole lot about government overreach and about the president, no matter what president it is, being someone they dislike and being a tyrant. So you'd think they would actually be like, hey, even if the vote doesn't go in our favor, we should still have a conversation about it. But they don't. So it's really weird to me that no one decides that this is a thing they should do. But what happens in this vote is that originally it had a lot more power than it does now, because the Supreme Court didn't like the original way that it worked. Originally, it was a concurrent resolution in which both chambers of Congress got together and voted, and if it was a simple majority, as in 51 people in the Senate and over half of the people in the House got together and voted to end the state of emergency, that was it. The state of emergency was over. But what happened was that the Supreme Court didn't like that. And in 1983, they ruled that it was unconstitutional, which is kind of fair. I understand that point of view if you're talking about trying to put such a severe limit on one of the president's powers, because despite what a lot of people don't realize, the president, at least in theory and at least in a normal state, doesn't have a tremendous amount of power. It's just that the responsibilities they have are extremely important, and they are one of the sole people in charge of foreign policy. So in those regards, they're extremely powerful, but a lot of stuff, they're curtailed and they're contained. But what ended up happening in the wake of this is that the National Emergencies Act was amended, and it was changed so that it was a joint resolution, and the president had the power to veto it. And if the president vetoed it, then it could only be overridden if 2/3 majorities in both chambers of Congress voted together. And frankly, even when the bill was first passed, even in 1976, that would have been difficult. Now, that's virtually impossible. I cannot imagine a situation in which both chambers of Congress vote 2/3 majority on the same side in virtually any issue. And that's something that's extremely important. So right now, if the president does decide to declare a state of emergency, it would be a difficult process to try and overcome it, provided the president decided to veto any moves to end this state of the emergency. So that's something that makes a lot of sense, but it's still something that people should be doing. It's still something that politicians and educators and policymakers everywhere should be advocating for, because there's already stuff going on that people disagree with, and there's already weapons that the president's considering using that would change the game politically. Especially because if the president decides to declare a state of emergency to build the wall, it would set a very weird precedent. It would be not quite the first hyper-partisan state of emergency, but it would definitely be the first one that would be challenged and criticized. But also, there are people in the Republican Party who are worried that if this is something the president decides to do, there are going to be people who are declaring states of emergency, say Bernie Sanders or Kamala Harris, or virtually any one of the Democrats running for president in 2020 decides to declare a state of emergency over gun violence or over climate change. Those are things that would have a precedent for them if the president right now decides to declare a state of emergency to build the wall, which is one of the reasons why people believe that the president decided to ultimately back out of this. And it's okay for people to not be chatting. I know. I'm super excited that there's 5 people watching. Honestly, I wasn't expecting this to get that much of an audience. I feel like this is an important but also really niche subject. So I'm not expecting there to be like super lively discussion, but honestly, I'm just excited that there are people here who are like, yeah, this is something that we should know more about. This is something we want to know more about. So yeah. One of the next things I wanted to talk about is what would actually happen if the president declared a state of emergency and used that as justification to go around Congress in order to get the funding to build the wall. Because that's a thing that some people are thinking he can do. There's been some discussion. It's not quite clear if this is actually one of the things that he could do, but it's definitely a thing that some people believe is a possibility. It's certainly something the president appears to believe is a possibility, although another valid possibility. I mean, yeah, that's a fair criticism. I do my best, Lady Unicorn. I'm doing my best. I feel like in that area, I've gotten a lot better because I was not able to use social media at all last year. But I suspect that the real reason the president decided to not try and declare a state of emergency isn't just the president, and not just the fact that he would probably lose. He'd probably be challenged and defeated either in the courts or by Congress if he actually decided to do this, but also the possibility that it's not at all an option. It's possible that he could use it to try and get the funding, but even if he does, that doesn't necessarily mean that he can use it to actually begin to build the wall. There's still other obstacles, legal ones, legislative ones, diplomatic ones, that would get in the way of that. So it's possible that he doesn't think it's worth setting the president ultimately to lose the war of the wall. And that's something that's perfectly valid. But if he does decide to try and declare a state of emergency, and he does decide to at least get the funding for the wall, we have to ask the question, where would that funding come from? Because that's a really important thing to talk about. And the question of where he would get the funding from is from other agencies that are under his control. And I talked about this on Twitter yesterday. I talked about this on Facebook yesterday, and it got a lot of really strong reactions. I also mentioned it during Mrs. Snarky's live stream when we were talking about capitalism. There are reports coming out that several government agencies have been asked to see what money could be moved around from their agencies and given to the president to try and build the wall. And the reality is those agencies can't really resist what the president's trying to do if he's actually super serious about it, because these are agencies that are under the direct control of the president. These are agencies that directly belong to the executive branch. And that's something that people need to realize. Like, politicians, elected officials, can resist what the president wants them to do to some extent. They can exert pressure on the president, they can try to get him to listen to reason, and they can also go around him if that doesn't work. But federal agencies don't have that same power. They don't have that same ability, which is part of the reason why there are people like me who want to get involved in government who hesitate to join the federal government agencies. Even those of us who are qualified have talked about concern about being forced to listen to what the president does. And it's really frustrating because we know that if we join an agency like FEMA, like the IRS, or like HUD, or like the DHS, then we are going to have to do what the president says to some extent. But if we become people who are elected officials, then we have power in different ways and in different agencies. So that's really important. But the reality here is that if the president does decide to declare a state of emergency to build the wall, something is going to happen. Also, hi, Unholy Mole. Just wanted to say, I see you. If the president does decide to declare a state of emergency, he is going to at least get the money. The question of whether or not he's going to be able to use the money is a different question. And it's something that's a lot more complicated than that. There's also the question of, will he be able to do all the stuff he wants to do fast enough before he loses this fight in one area or another? Especially because right now, he doesn't have the backing of his party on this. He doesn't have the backing of his party in a really artificial way. The reality is the Republicans probably will fall in line and do whatever it is that he says, but right now they're hesitating. And that doesn't mean much in the long run, but it does give him reason to think about this more critically than if they had just voiced their support. And of course, this isn't universal. There are a handful of Republicans who are all in with the president, people like Lindsey Graham, who just a couple of days ago was arguing against doing the state of emergency, but just, I think, earlier today was like saying in a tweet that the president should absolutely declare a state of emergency and use it to get the funding to build the wall. Also, I don't know what device of mine just went off. Sorry about that. So that's something that we really need to consider. Right now, there are reasons for him to pause, and that's good enough. But if he decides to continue, it's going to be hard to keep him from doing real damage, which is part of the reason why states of emergency should ultimately be even more contained and constrained than they are right now. And People are wanting to constrain and restrain these powers even more, which is good. But another conversation we really need to have is that both mayors and governors have similar powers. Now, admittedly, the extent to which they have these same capabilities differs from state to state, and also the level of accountability they're going to be held to differs from state to state. But the reality is that these powers are very real, they're very dramatic, and they have the ability to change communities. These are not things that we need to underestimate, and these aren't things we need to be ignorant of. If we're ignorant of the political realities of things like this, then we are going to hurt ourselves, and we're going to find it harder to tell people to back off from these sorts of nuclear options. Because the reality is that if Donald Trump decides to do this, it is a nuclear option, and it will have blowback. So that's something worth considering. It's something worth reminding him and his allies who are supporting this, because Donald Trump isn't going to be the president forever. And when someone else, either another Republican who disagrees with him in a lot of really critical areas, or a Democrat who strongly disagrees with him in pretty much everything, has the ability to do this, it's entirely possible that they will, especially if he's already set the precedent. So now I'm going to talk just a little bit about humanistic takes on this. I've already talked about some of these things. I've talked about working with legislators and trying to create bipartisan groups that create legislation that would contain and push back against these. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how local people can get together and they can push back against these sorts of powers, because they can. There are processes by which people can comment on legislation, and there are accountability measures in things like FEMA and in things like declaring a state of emergency that enable people to push back against them. And it's really important. Sorry, I was sitting really far away from my screen, so I felt like I had to project my voice. There are important things that people can do that would push back against this. Chrismer already said one: elections, because elections are probably the ultimate power, especially in cases like mayors and governors. If enough people don't like a state of emergency and the ways that states of emergency are co-opted and turned into political weapons, then there are going to be people who are held accountable. And the easiest people to hold accountable, especially at the local level, are elected officials, people like mayors and governors. And that's something that's really good. It's fantastic that there are ways that we can remind politicians that even if they declare a state of emergency, even if it works for right now, they're going to have to get elected again at some point. They're not just going to be able to run around and avoid. Jesus, I hope I still have internet. Okay, my internet went down on my iPad. Sorry about that. But yeah, elections are probably the ultimate measure by which we can hold politicians accountable, all politicians, but there's also other things that we can do. One, we can push for more education on these topics. We can write letters to the editors. We can hold protests. We can have fun getting creative in how we remind people that this sort of stuff will result in people being held to account. So if they think that they can use this recklessly, then they need to be ready for the reality that they're going to face in the next time they're going to be elected. Unfortunately, that doesn't stop them from declaring a short-term state of emergency, because it's entirely possible that President Donald Trump's plan here was to lose this fight in the long run, but to scare people and also to take money from other government agencies and to use it recklessly. I suspect that was probably his original ultimate plan, and someone either talked enough sense into him or he got scared out of the reception that he got immediately after making that comment, that he decided to back off of it. But at the end of the day, the threats that he's made and the research that he was doing was real. The thing that was happening with Puerto Rico is that there is a fund, and there's money in that fund to ultimately help Puerto Rico recover in the long term from the hurricanes that it was hit by in 2017. And the really sad part about that is that the president was asking people in relevant agencies if that money could be taken from that purpose and given to him, because that money was earmarked for future use. It wasn't money that had already been used. It was money that was sitting somewhere and was waiting for appropriate times to be given to the government of Puerto Rico and to be given to communities in Puerto Rico. And once again, as I've mentioned before, it would be difficult for the federal agencies to say no to that if that was the thing that he decided to do. So it is really important that we be hyper conscious and we be vigilant of this sort of thing, and the fact that this is a reality that we have to live in and that we have to endure, especially so long as we have presidents and politicians who are corrupt and who are willing to use money that is actual disaster relief as a political war chest and as money that they can use to build symbols to their own self-imagined glory. It's dangerous and it's sad, and you guys know that I feel really strongly about it, but now is the time for me to stop talking to myself and about myself. It's time for me to talk to you guys. So if you guys want to join me, let me know. I'm going to be sending some folks the link. I'm not going to be pausing this live stream. One, I don't know how. And also, I don't really feel like pausing it. I feel like trying to see if we could have some fun with this and we can make this one continuous stream. So I'm going to get ready to start sending out links. There's some folks that I know were very interested, and I'm going to be sending it out to them first. But I would love for you guys to send me your information if you want to come on. Also, if you can't make it today, let me know. That's fine. Also, 30 minutes is perfect. That is the perfect amount of time for this, because I only want this to be either 30 minutes or to an hour for this particular thing. So I'm currently sending out links. If you get the link and you can hop on, just hop on. Don't worry about interrupting me. Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
So what do you think of the stream? So I know that you are affected by the government shutdown, and I know that that's a thing that's super serious. Are there any ways that people who are listening right now can help you out?
Well, I already have on my video about it and on Twitter going around links to some wish lists for basic household things and for helping with the animals, because it's not just the shutdown that's gotten to me, it's also my cat being sick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if people have money for that, there's those. There's also a PayPal link to somebody else in the house that they could always, again, would help out with household stuff. I'm fortunate in most of how it's affected isn't going to actually kick in until next month. But yeah.
I'll definitely share after the video's over. I'll go back in and I'll put a comment in to your wish lists so that way people can see them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, hey, Wonder Lady.
Hey.
Yeah, hi.
So much sense in so little time. How are you?
I'm doing good. This was an interesting stream. I feel like I wanted to get through it in 30 minutes, which is a time crunch for me since I talk a whole lot.
Especially for such a big topic.
Well, I work and know a lot of people who are in a vulnerable position because of the government shutdown, and it's not pretty, because the statement is people will have food stamps in February, but not necessarily in March.
Not even necessarily in February. They're going to be underfunded. They're not going to have enough to fund all the programs. Don't know what the situation is as far as how they're going to, sort that out. And then there's things like here where the cases were supposed to be renewed before February, so...
Not only that, but you also have to worry about HUD.
Yeah, fortunately for me, I'm not on that one. But yeah, it's another big thing that's definitely...
Well, people who are on government assistance for HEAP, and that's called HEAP, HEAP, they usually get their money, like, in the very beginning let's say late November, early December, but not before, because even though it might snow early, you don't get
It depends on the person. They start out with people who are listed as disabled being able to apply in October. Then
You
it
can
goes to
apply,
children
but
and
you don't get it until November or December.
yeah.
Even people who get it yearly don't get it until like the end of November or early December. It's that way every year.
Yearly, that would be nice. Around here, we had to last year go in and wait for hours.
Yeah, well,
Appointment.
if you get HEAP and food stamps, you're pretty much already automatically enrolled. They just need to verify every year that you're on HEAP and food stamps. I'm sorry, like that you're disabled and on food stamps, and then if that's the case,
Oh, I
then
know
you're
I would automatically qualify.
right.
But then all the hassle of the paperwork and the frequently not having enough employees and such.
Right, but the thing is, it's like they get their money all at once, and then they have the winter
Yeah.
to get through it. So that's not going to affect people who are looking to heat their homes. But when
Yeah,
it
it's at least good for that.
food, they might be warm, but they're going to be starving.
Yeah, and then
I don't know how I feel about that. It's kind of like weird.
usually I have the opposite problem to be concerned about because a lot of places, I can't speak to everywhere in the country, obviously, but a lot of places that I've seen end up with so many people worrying about the food problem that as long as you know where to go, you end up with that covered, but literally anything else is a problem.
I wanted to, I'm going to chime in for 2 seconds. First, hey, Chrismer. Also,
Hi.
So Lady Unicorn, I made you a moderator. For some reason, it's not letting me post your Amazon wish list in the comments, but now you can do that yourself. So.
Oh, in the chat? Yeah. Okay.
Yay. Sorry. I was talking too much.
No, it's fine. Like now, the way I want to do this is I want humanists in our community to come on and to be able to talk about stuff related to the topic. Because I feel like having conversations about politics, it's something that we do, but I feel like doing it this way isn't something that we often do, which is kind of frustrating.
And I'm sorry if you hear something in the background. My friend is playing Dragon Quest XI, so
understandable. It's a good game.
Hello, Chrismer.
Hey.
How are you?
My computer's a bit slow tonight, but I'm fine. How are you tonight?
I'm feeling a little crazy, mostly about the government shutdown.
That's a damn shame. The whole government shutdown bullshit. Sorry for cursing, but
This is fine. A single curse or two shouldn't be too controversial.
Yeah, but I gotta foul out.
What was said on the Senate floor?
Oh, what was that? Impeach that
Yeah.
I made a video about that, and also we had some folks and I had a conversation about that actually.
I loved that. By the way, that was just the best.
I really liked the comments. I understood why it was that people were frustrated with them, but I honestly thought that's like, yeah, politicians are normal people.
Yeah,
they're gonna cuss sometimes. They probably shouldn't cuss all the time, but I feel like if it's just once or twice, no one should be complaining.
With how much Trump cursed on the damn campaign trail, I think Secular Talk actually made a video of every single time Trump cussed on the campaign trail, and it was glorious in showing, that MPs said MFR. Yeah, they can't say anything about civility after seeing that.
Right.
They have no grounds.
It is what it is. But yeah, if they can say that on the Senate floor, then I feel like we could say anything.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just being selfish, but
don't you know that the there's different rules that apply to them. They get all the special privileges, and hell, the Senate even gets paid.
I know. That is the wildest thing in the world to me. Like, there are so many people right now who aren't getting paid. There are people who literally lost their jobs because of this. Like, not the actual government employees, but, and I talked about this during my government shutdown live stream, but like the contractors who technically work for middlemen, they are people who are not going to get paid at all, and a handful of them have literally lost their jobs, which drives me insane.
Yeah.
And then you've also got people who did things like the ones that'll do like the tours for various parks and that may or may not be able to have their jobs working right now. You've got people who vendors in courts in some areas obviously make any money from that because
I hate to say this, but I really wish that there was some accountability for this. Like if you're going to be a government, if you're going to be a government employee, you should be guaranteed a paycheck.
The thing is,
if you're not, and you lose your livelihood, and it was for a not emergency type thing, or like.
So you're saying that they should have ramifications? They should have ramifications.
We're going to hold government officials accountable? What?
Consequences.
Yeah. That's unheard of.
That's un-American.
I know it's un-American, but can we have consequences? Can we have at least these people not get their paychecks too?
I've heard that some are refusing
can't we fire them if we want to?
Okay, recount votes are a thing. They're not the easiest thing in the world to call for. We should probably change the process by which recount votes can be called, but that is technically a thing that's theoretically possible. But yeah, our government isn't for us.
Well, see, even the voting machine problem was ridiculous. I mean, we're still using technology from 2013.
It's 2019, guys. We need an upgrade.
We need upgrades anyway.
Did you know that actually talking about upgrades, the security on most protocols on most government computers are from the 90s and 80s?
They're from the time of Friends and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Jesus.
Yeah. Some of them's back from the 1950s. I mean, back when first computers first came out. Well, for government use anyway.
Hey, Terry. How's it going?
Hello.
So what's your... I know that you are from the UK, so what's your perspective on our super lovely American system?
Well, for a start, I'm not from the UK.
Oh, where are you from?
Somewhere else.
Thanks.
I thought my avatar gave it away.
I'm American. I don't know geography.
You don't know geography.
That's a really common American stereotype. I know geography in Latin America, where I was raised. That's about it.
I'm in the southern hemisphere, so that'll help.
Want to say Australia, but I know better than that.
No, you'll have to say Australia.
Australia doesn't exist.
Yeah, Australia's not real.
That's what I was trying to get him to say.
I only know American things, guys.
Okay. Well, we're pretty out of the way down here. We don't know what's going on around the world.
Well, what concerns me is, and this is not ego talking, it's idiocy talking, but other countries tend to like do what we do or value what we value simply because it's like, we're successful, let's be success, that type of thing, or whatever. The Americans got away with it, we can get away with it. I don't want anyone copying Trump. Did you hear where he told Spain to build a wall in Africa? Did anyone hear that? Because that's nuts. We can. That's nuts.
Well,
keep
see-
out who, though? To keep someone in or to keep someone out?
Well, see, I'm singularly unique because I actually am for open borders across the entire world.
You and me both.
I'm actually also kind of an open borders person. So the Latinx left, the radical Hispanic leftists, especially the ones that are raised in the United States, are all very correct when it comes to the immorality of borders. And also, I'm just like, hey, Chrismer and I were talking about this earlier today. We were talking about the need to move to a post-capitalist system. And
Yeah.
odds are one of the things that's going to happen with a post-capitalist system is it's going to be easier for people to talk about open borders.
Yeah, I'm part of that 1% that wants the New World Order. No. I'm not with that crowd. But I do want a one world order, one where everyone's equal. That would be nice.
Well, all I can say is, I read an article today and they had a perfect quote. The United States may not be responsible for immigrants' lives, but in many cases right now, we are responsible for their deaths.
Yes.
I can't argue that.
We have deported people who shouldn't have been deported, dreamers, and they get sent home. Some of them get kidnapped and ransomed. One woman had to pay $4,000 to get her boyfriend back, or at least out of control. Other people are getting murdered because, people are assuming they have money and they don't have money, and it's just a mess and it's a shame. And Trump is responsible and he needs to be held on charges.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But right now, it wouldn't be good to impeach him because then we'd have President Pence, an actual competent evil person.
Right, but I'm sure there's evidence that, like, I don't have the videos anymore, and I wish I had the know-how. Mrs. Snarky taught me how to, like, download YouTube videos, but I can't find them because I didn't save them. There were so many at the time. But it sounded like Pence knew all about it, because they were hand in hand in the whole Russia thing during the campaign. Just seems like he knew. And at the time it sounded fishy. And now it's really fishy, but I don't know where the videos are where he's like in the interview saying what he's saying.
Well, I think mostly what they would get him for would be rote incompetence and maybe the emoluments clause, which he violates every single day.
I think he should be investigated for knowledge of conspiracy and not doing anything about it.
There's that likelihood too.
Yeah, I think I might have a slightly controversial opinion on it, though, because I'm not sure that it's actually worse to have the competent evil jackass in office for, like, a year compared to having an incompetent one that throws temper tantrums instead of doing anything.
True.
I understand that opinion.
I understand that, but there's a lot that can be done in 1 year.
Well, there's a lot to be done in 1 year, but we do have Democrats in positions now to give him a hard time, and that would also change the Speaker of the House.
And there's also a lot of damage. There's also a lot of damage that can be done by somebody who doesn't care and just wants their way.
Yeah, well, he's almost started how many wars via Twitter right now?
Yeah,
and not only that, the biggest danger about Pence taking over for a year is the fact that 2020 we're having a re-election, and if we go from, what's the word?
one issue I have with the Democrats though, they're pushovers, and also
agreed.
Some of them agree with Trump. Many of them agree with Trump.
A lot of Germans agreed with Hitler.
Yeah.
Oh, that one happens to have a lot to do with very twisted senses of empathy and community and such. But
And the
know-
fact that the Overton window has shifted so far to the right that now
yeah,
Democrats are now moderate Republicans in a sense.
That's part of why I like people like
You're-
ASD who've been pushing hard against that. It's
Yeah,
nice.
but Elizabeth Warren is going to run.
Oh God.
I don't know enough about her foreign policy to be able to be like, sure, she's great. Like, she's better than Trump, but that's such a low bar that, like, it's not even.
Yeah, that's a very low. But Paul Ryan would be better than Trump at this point.
I like the idea of Warren from what I know about her so far, but as a Latin American, I'm just like, hey, I really need to know about her foreign policy. Like, I need to know about it, like, right now to be able to be like, sure, I'm going to vote for her.
I haven't heard anything terribly ridiculous.
The only thing I have against her is the fact that she backed Hillary and not Bernie.
I know I feel the same, but I also feel like if we're going to get anywhere, we gotta, like, basically do what Bernie did and step up and make our decisions.
And then there's an idiot saying that Bernie isn't a Democrat. I'm like,
so?
So? I mean, he's not a
Trump's
socialist.
not a Republican.
He's not a socialist either. I mean, he claims he is, but he is not a socialist.
He's a
I wish we could genuinely say, though, that somebody wasn't a Democrat or wasn't a Republican, because with only two parties, you pretty much end up on one or the other.
True.
Well, I can't say I'm not a Democrat. I've never been a Democrat.
Well, you have a lot of independent when it comes to individuals, but when you're talking about somebody who's going to manage to get elected, you don't have independents, really. You have Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
They have to go on one or the other ticket or they have no chance. I want to have more than two parties.
It'd be awesome to have more than two parties. That's why, damn it, what's the name of that system? Ranked choice voting would be very nice.
That would be amazing. But you know what else we would probably need to do to have much of a chance at more than two parties in this country? At least, even if we don't actually get rid of the system, just reform the electoral college to where you don't need an absolute majority. Because otherwise you have, if there's more than two people who have a chance of becoming president, you end up with Congress getting to make that decision, which who wants that?
Our whole system needs to be rewritten from the ground up.
Well, we definitely need more. I mean, there are more credentials in getting a job at a gas station than president of the United States.
There's more credentials for cutting hair than there are.
True.
To be fair, you have to get more training to cut hair than you do in order to be a police officer in terms of sheer time spent. And I feel like that's kind of a problem. Also, the reality is if you're going to be a police officer, you should probably be bilingual. And not everywhere, but in most parts of the country, it should probably be a requirement for you to be at least somewhat okay in another language before you can be a police officer. That would help.
Yeah, that would help tremendously. That and to know not to, and to know not to escalate.
I'm a peace and conflict person. Believe me, I know.
Don't get me started on the fact that our police need de-escalation skills and people to quit supporting unnecessary escalation of force just because.
Because, I mean, your first instinct should not be to pull out your gun.
Exactly. But
yeah, and
let's be realistic. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what's with the training? I can't remember which video it was, but it was one of them where they actually let media in to show, to try to back up why they need to do this way. And they were, like, the step down from a gun was, like, somebody who was completely unarmed, visibly unarmed, but moving aggressively at all. While confrontational was to grab a taser for that.
Wow.
That's ridiculous.
I'm checking which... Sorry, go on.
Can you imagine regular people, just ordinary, everyday people, responded like that to any kind of conflict? Except apparently somebody coming in their house, then plenty of people in the country think, oh, well, they entered your house at all. It's fine to kill them. It's fine to track them down and kill them. But yeah.
Well, if
Can you
you
just
do kill
imagine
them,
most
they
people
have
don't?
to be in your home, not on the property. In most states, which
Yeah.
is ridiculous, by the way. We spent $700 billion on defense in 2018. Let that sink in.
Doesn't even surprise me.
This is ridiculous.
We spend more on our military than the next. I think it was what, 21 nations combined.
Yeah.
I thought it was only
What
8
are we
combined.
spending it on? We sell weapons to other countries.
Yeah.
We don't
We
spend
spent-
it on our veterans. We don't spend it on veterans care.
No, we spend it on weapons we don't actually need at overpriced markets.
And then we sell them.
Yeah, to our enemies. You know, people like Saudi Arabia.
Or leave them behind.
That's capitalism, y'all. That right there is
That's
one of
capitalism.
the key
Why
issues
should
with capitalism.
taxpayers pay for a product that we're selling to our enemies?
At least you know what the enemies have got then, don't you, when you go to war with them?
It doesn't help when it's like weapons of mass destruction, though.
Am I wrong by thinking this is completely crazy?
No,
Have they
you're right.
ever justified this to the people? We are paying, instead of schools, instead of roads, instead of bridges, instead of clean water, instead of marking territory for never to be used for oil or anything else like that. We build weapons and we sell this to our enemy. How
would be
stupid
interested
are
in verifying
we?
that. To be honest, I would be interested in verifying that they're actually bought by the government and then sold by the government to enemies or whatever.
So there are ways. So what I actually study is related to military and civilian relationships. So I know some of the ways that this is done. What's being said is basically what happens in some cases, especially because it's really difficult to confirm that the weapons that we sell to a different country, unless it's being used directly by that country's military, it's difficult to confirm what is actually happening to those weapons. I also wanted to say earlier, when we were talking about police training, in Florida in 2015, this wasn't in 2010 or in the 1990s, there was a police precinct that got in trouble because they were firing at mugshots, and they were firing at mugshots of Black people. So, everything about this is mind-boggling. One, why are you training your people to shoot using pictures of people instead of I'm not a guns person, so what I'm about to say next is gonna sound ignorant, but whatever. Instead of just having them be hey, here's the training dummy, shoot the training dummy, shoot the little targets. Why do you have to put a face?
Those paper ones even.
Damn, I was about to say, Karl Marx was actually a firm advocate of the poor owning guns. Just say it. Gun ownership is a very socialist thing.
Yeah.
It's very social. A lot of people say well, socialists don't want you to have weapons. I'm like, bullshit. They want you to be armed.
Your guns.
But they want you to be well armed in order to take over the government, if need be.
Also, I've been doing I've been checking for the defense spending stuff, because I generally hear the next somewhere between 7 to 10 countries. So far, what I'm seeing, the information, I'm gonna put a lot of stuff in the comments after this broadcast is over, so that way people
hopefully remember all of it.
Yeah.
Well, I have the ones I'm gonna be spending. I have the ones I'm gonna be sharing bookmarked, so I'll do it as soon as the broadcast is over. But the next, the information I found was from 2018, and it says that compared to the next 7 countries, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, India, France, the UK, and Japan, we spend 610 billion to their total 578 billion. So if those are the next countries, it's possible that the ones after that, we're still going to be outspending, even when they combine, unless we get to the point of Israel, which is a country that also spends a massive amount of money on their defense budget.
Yeah. Oh, it's 13
But if
countries. It's
they-
13 countries combined. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's the number that I've heard.
13, sorry, not 21.
Too many.
Still way too many. But I think the 21 number, that was the one that they had actually added all together to show just how much we spend. And yeah, it's ridiculous. Just
On military than some countries have for their entire GDP.
The more than most countries have for their entire GDP.
Oh.
Am I wrong though by like being curious about where our money's going?
I think that's a
Yeah.
perfectly reasonable concern. I just wish that there were easier ways, especially when it comes to stuff like weapons and like the research technology that we send to other countries. I wish that it was better like measures that we could take so that way we could be like, hey, this is what this country is doing with the defense technology we sent them, and this is the information that they may or may not be sharing with other countries.
Yeah, and I don't think it's ever wrong for somebody to want to know what their government is up to in various ways, including how the money they're being given is spent.
Yeah, especially since they act like the money that they take from us didn't come from us.
didn't we have a war about that? You know, the whole taxation without representation thing?
What happened after that war? I'm trying to remember, guys.
We accidentally won. And then we couldn't get anyone to govern us, so we had to come up with our own system.
There was something about tea bags in the Boston Harbor.
You know, it wasn't just an argument. I think on our side it was an argument about the taxation without representation thing, which, by the way, is why feminists like appeared, because women would sit there, their husbands would die, they'd own land, and then they'd be in the position where, you know, it's like you can't vote for how your money's spent, but yet you have to pay taxes. That's not fair. That started it.
Purple rhymes with orange. We won because the French hated the British more than we did.
They also hated the British more than they hated us, which is something that a lot of people forget.
Yeah.
Well, it took a lot of ass kissing.
But we returned the favor in the 30s, though.
Yeah.
However, we did say that we would help them with their revolution, and we didn't.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Hamilton.
Yeah, see, the French Revolution, that was actually based on my own ideology and syndicalism. The syndicalists were fighting the communists, and we saw how that turned out.
Well, also, it kind of helps if, like, your populace isn't resorting to eating grass.
Yummy.
Yummy.
While
awesome.
the elite are taking baths in fresh strawberries.
Well, let them eat cake.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, if one person is bathing in fresh strawberries, but your populace who is basically paying for those strawberries are eating grass, dying of starvation and malnutrition, you have a problem.
Yeah, but the problem is there's not enough cake to go around.
Well,
Sorry.
I know that if it gets bad enough, because I work for myself, and I'm losing clients left and right all the time, or like today, they stop payment on checks because they're afraid of the government shutdown. Yeah, I'm kind of screwed right now. I know at the very least, as long as I have money for rent, I'll be okay. Because come springtime, I do dig up dandelion roots and chicory roots and, roast them, grind them, drink them. I know how to forage a bit, so I'm going to be okay. However, not many people have those skills.
Yep.
Well,
and not many people live in the environment where they can go foraging.
To a certain degree, you could help people learn certain skills. And also, one I was about to point out if you use green onions or spring onions, whichever way you want to refer to them, it's the same plant. If you use them, if you don't cut all the way down to like basically the roots, if you leave a little bit of it there, you can put it in tap water and it will regrow. It doesn't even take anything, just tap water works.
I do that. I do that. I have like little things around my house. Like I'm growing turnips in a pot.
Yeah.
I'm growing ginger in a pot.
I have to be careful about what I try to grow because animals that will tear into whatever or decide that a pot of dirt is a bathroom.
Yeah, I get it. I really do. But I mean,
but yeah,
it's kind of extreme because you're going to have people who go through this who are going to be able to survive off their credit cards long enough for a period of time to be kind of okay.
Or people who have enough already that it's not even a matter of debt.
Right, and then you have people who live paycheck by paycheck who don't have good credit, who may be in bad shape, and then you have others who have no resources at all who are already in bad shape. You put all that together and you're just like,
And you have people who have, and then you have people who have some resources, but they stay in perpetual, not even paycheck to paycheck, but just a perpetual barely in more debt every time.
Exactly.
Well, I'm on social security myself. I have different disabilities and everything. Like for one, stuttering, as you could probably tell.
No,
I'm on disability myself, so I understand that.
Social security does not give you enough to survive. They don't.
Oh no, even with me getting over what SSI would be, with me getting it from my mom's work history and getting too much for SSI, it's still so low that somebody working a part-time minimum wage job brings in almost as much as I do.
Yeah, no, somebody working a part-time minimum wage job actually brings home more than I do.
I think, if I recall correctly, most people who are on government assistance only make somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 a year. Period.
I get $800 a month.
Yeah, I'm a little bit over that, so
that's pretty.
And that's after 9 years. That's after 9 years.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, prices aren't going down; they're going up. The crops in Europe failed this year because of climate change. Then you have other places, say California, who are having their own environmental issues and also contaminated crops.
Well,
that also raises prices.
Even with that, we make enough food to feed everybody in the U.S. We throw away around half of it.
Oh, yeah.
We already live in a post-scarcity society. There are 4 homes for every there are 4 vacant homes, rather, for every homeless person on the street in the U.S.
There is twice as many empty homes as there are homeless.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact ratio, but yeah, there's more houses that are empty than there are homeless individuals, even without taking into account that those are often families of multiple people who would live together. Then there's also the whole wall thing. Then there's also the whole wall thing and the 5.7 billion.
Walls don't work.
I had
it depends on what you're trying to do, but I had a point.
We have airplanes now. Hasn't he heard
I
of airplanes?
had a specific point to that, though. The 5.7 billion would manage to pay the rent for every homeless person for more than half the year.
Yeah, that too.
But yeah, they start not working. They work depending on what you're trying to do, but that's not where we have most of the immigration from, and it's not where we have any kind of terrorists really from. In fact, where they actually detain terrorists currently has a lot of people not showing up to work because they're not being paid, and that's the airports.
I was actually going to say that, like, most like drugs come through border checkpoints. Like they're not carried over by like drug mules. And also almost half of the Latinx undocumented immigrants right now are people who overstay visas.
And most of the drugs we have, like say heroin, for instance, in the US, doesn't come from the border. It comes from pharmaceutical companies selling it, and then people cut it and sell it on the street.
What a wild country we live in. That so much of our politics is
It's
based
awful.
off of lies. Like,
Because Percocet,
awful.
for instance, or oxycodone, hydrocodone, anything in the codone family.
I wish they'd just quit making the whole thing. I mean, I understand having it illegal and having crimes associated with making certain things, or selling it in certain. But I wish they would quit with the idea of it being a crime to use any of it. And I kind of hate the way they go about trying to reduce the use of prescription drugs.
The war on drugs is not working.
Well, even just the ideological side of it, even just like all the stuff they'll push that gets doctors and that more nervous to write the scripts. It's like, it's good if they can get somebody a different way to use it, but how many people are not getting what they need to take care of their pain now?
one of the issues. Sorry.
Go ahead.
One of the issues with like prescribing drug reducing medicine and medication is that there are certain populations where doctors don't take, like, one, there are certain demographics that don't report their pain to the accurate level, but also like it's been shown, and there have been a handful of studies that have strongly suggested that doctors don't take women's pain seriously, which is absolutely like, there's a lot of stuff that boggles my mind, but of all the things that boggle my mind, that one really gets me. That's an entire gender.
Yeah,
like
hashtag feminism. Hashtag feminism. This is why we need hashtag feminism.
I am what do you call it? Drug resistant to certain pain medications. Well, to most of them. And the thing is, if I am in pain, it's big too, because I can take a lot of pain. Like, I don't feel pain the way a normal person does.
Excuse me.
So, what do you call it?
Pain resistance.
I had a problem. I went to the doctor. I said, this hurts way too much and I need help. And they're like, oh, it's nothing, blah, blah, blah. Like, what's your scale of pain? And I told them, but I also told them, like, look, I have a problem here because I am also, like, medication resistant and I don't feel pain the way normal people do. And I was basically, like, ignored. Well, I needed surgery. They sent me home with nothing and told me to basically suck it up.
Wow.
I needed surgery. Like, I tore off a toe and I was sitting calmly in the waiting room with my foot up, wrapped up. And they're like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine.
That's another problem, is just our healthcare is the worst. I mean, unless you're rich, then you... Okay, get this then. The government, the Congress, House Representatives, President, Vice, everybody in Congress, they have the best healthcare. Yet they think they have the right to strip millions of Americans of their healthcare because they want their perfect capitalist system in place.
And they also get paid a whole lot more than they think everybody else should have. And
well, capitalism and healthcare just does not mix.
No, that is one thing that should not be dealt with by the markets.
No.
I think there's a lot more than one thing, but I'm glad
it is one. I didn't say it's the one.
Sorry, that was my bad. I heard you say that was the one. That was my bad.
No, it is one thing.
It is one thing.
There are others, but that is definitely one thing that should not have a market.
I gave Paul Ryan a hard time because he's just like blah blah blah, and it's like, yeah, well, give us your healthcare.
Yeah.
And there was like something from last year of him at like some kind of event, like St. Patrick's Day event, and I'm going, but we paid for that meal. And we paid for the beer that you're drinking. Do you necessarily need a beer? Like, how there is just like, oh, well, poor people shouldn't have this and shouldn't have that. And you have enough for a cell phone, but And it's like, yeah,
Oh, then
people need cell phones.
Oh,
there was Ben
you have a
Shapiro
cell
who
phone, then
likened
you
it
don't
to
need food.
There was a politician, I think it was Devin Nunes, who said that, like, how do people not have enough to have healthcare if they have a cell phone? Like the price of a cell phone and the price of healthcare are the same.
I think
What?
it was specifically comparing an iPhone, but still.
One thing that pissed me off especially was when Ben Shapiro likened it to buying furniture.
Oh God, yeah, that.
I'm like, okay, so a human life is worth like a chair to you now? Is that it?
And you call yourself pro-life.
You call
The
yourself
Trump
pro-life?
administration has recommended government employees start selling their furniture in order to get through this.
Can we sell our elected officials instead?
Sounds like a plan to me.
Yeah. Like I said before, people, I don't support the hashtag Eat the Rich movement. They live on very, very unhealthy lifestyles. I mean, diets, and that leads to bacteria propagation. So instead, compost the rich.
Hey, I'm all for human composting. Actually, it is a movement.
That actually is a movement. Like there was news about human composting a couple of days ago on Twitter.
Well, I watch Ask a Mortician, so I'm part of a death positive thing, but yeah.
VHEMT.
Well, you know, I believe in people. We used to have like funerals out of our own homes, and
Well, see,
now
I'm a member of VHEMT, the Voluntary Human Extinction Movement.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I wouldn't mind. What do you call it? Spay your pets and spay your pets and your family. So.
Spay and neuter your family, please.
Yeah. A friend of mine today told me that her daughter is having another baby, and I said, at this rate, you do realize that's pollution. Just seen her face.
Wow.
And I'm going, it is pollution. She has 6. You know, you need to talk to her. She's like, well, she just loves babies. And I said, she could foster.
That's a really good point.
That's an addiction at that point, isn't it?
Well, as far as fostering or adopting, the thing with is babies actually get homes really quick. If it would be like kids, oh yeah, because then there's a bunch of them that really need it.
Oh, she loves babies, but she's got 5 kids, and she's on her way to another one.
Yeah, my aunt.
There's a point where you have to get that shit surgically taken care of, you know.
Yeah. Well, she wanted to get pregnant.
Yeah.
There's vasectomies, and then there's what you call it for women, hysterectomies.
Oh, they frequently won't do it. Seriously, they frequently will not do it for women who want it. They'll sit there and tell us how we're not sure, we can't be sure that we want to do it and all this other stuff. My mom wanted
to a doctor to get a vasectomy. He's like, okay, step on up.
Yeah, my mom wanted to at one point because she just basically dealing with birth control and hormones and such, and she wanted to fix that.
Yeah.
And because it wasn't a medical necessity, they just didn't want to do it.
I know my guy who couldn't get out.
Kept having kids until she had a girl.
Well, I've got to step off in a few.
Okay.
They should make it illegal for guys not to walk around without a condom.
That doesn't mean it's going to be used. There are a lot of guys who don't know how to put on condoms.
Well, see,
get rid of the. Go ahead.
Go on.
The whole thing with abortions is if it were, you know, if men were giving birth, they'd do that shit right away. No question asked. They're like, yeah.
I wonder because it seems to me that a lot of men, especially these days, are into the idea of having kids, not raising them, having them. There's a distinct difference.
Yeah, that would be rather difficult.
I really like kids. I don't like babies.
I do not like I do not like kids or babies. Stay away from
I've worked as a teacher before. I've worked as like a substitute teacher, and I just genuinely really like being around kids. So like kids are cool to me. I'm not a fan of babies.
I'm not a fan
Babies
of
are
kids or
gross.
babies. They're just small humans that are really annoying to me.
My kids were
They're
useful when
rude
they were
ass
old
too.
enough
Yeah, they're rude.
Terry, what were you saying?
I said my kids were useful when they were able to go to the fridge and get me a beer.
There's a I forget. There was a TED talk about a woman. She went up and talked about her struggle to be sterilized because she didn't want children. And I know some other women who couldn't get certain medical procedures because they were medical because of like endometriosis and things like that, but they wouldn't do what they needed to do because what if her boyfriend wanted to have kids? She had to get permission from her boyfriend to
Oh,
get a medical
up.
boyfriend, not husband,
Even
to
if it
get
were
a medical
husband,
procedure.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
even if it were husband, it'd be unacceptable. But like boyfriend, like, what if they started dating
Boyfriend.
last week?
Exactly, but it's like
ugh,
it's
trust me.
ass gravy. I'm sorry.
We've got a thing over here where the girls will keep having children, not necessarily by the same person, and they'll stay on the Social Security while they got the children. But if the children reach a certain age, they have to go to work. So what they do is they have another child. So they end up with half a dozen children, and eventually they're going to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it's like over there with the same thing if you're on Social Security and you've got a child. To look for work, that is.
Over here, a lot of Social Security. So in cases of stuff like unemployment, generally you have to have been fired. It's not like you can just get a job and quit and then get on unemployment in most states. And then there's also like certain places where you have to be actively looking for work, or you have to be doing like volunteer community service in order to qualify for some type of Social Security or social aid.
If you're not listed as disabled, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. If you're not listed as disabled.
Oh, y'all,
Yeah,
this was a nice
there's-
conversation and all, but I've got to go.
Okay.
We'll see you later. It was nice to
We'll
talk
see you
to you.
later. Nice to talk to you, Chrismer.
Same as well. Wonder Lady and Luciano and Terry and whoever else I'm missing. I can't remember the names.
Lady
It's
Unicorn.
alright.
Lady Unicorn. Lady Unicorn. I'm sorry.
It's
Lady
fine.
Unicorn.
It's
I'm
fine.
sorry. I didn't know your name. I just saw the unicorn. I'm like, what was your name again? Anyway, I'm off now.
You're fine.
All right.
Have fun.
I did hear about like one or two states where, in order to stay on benefits, people have had to get volunteer positions.
Yeah, it's not.
that is.
Sorry, it's not super common, but there are a handful of states like that. Mostly Republican ones, as far as I know.
No, here's what's worse though. Okay, you just keep saying that some of the stuff's not common, but the thing is, even for food stamps, except when it's let up for various reasons, you have to be working 20 hours or volunteering 20 hours or disabled or a child
We had that problem
during several
Well,
things.
all I've got to say is
Who's trying to
I'm
talk?
sick and tired of it.
Terry, what were you saying?
Where I am, I'm looking for work, and I can do voluntary work, and that'll help me out looking for work through the job network that I have to report to every fortnight. That's because of my age. I can work. I can do voluntary work for 15 hours a week, or be employed for 15 hours a week or more, not to do job search. But in Northern Territory, they want to start a scheme where, because of the Aboriginals always drinking and having a drinking problem up there, they're going to even do a thing like what you used to do with your food stamp type thing, where they can only get paid by some sort of credit card or whatever, where they can go to the shop and just buy their food because of their drinking. Because all they used to buy was just beer.
But there is a problem with programs that literally only provide just food, and that's the fact that they only provide food, and food's not the only need.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, if it was food only where I am, people would freeze to death.
Well, see, what you get is what we can do what we could do here is we get all our money taken out before we even get it. It'll pay for the utility or it'll pay for the rent, and then we might just end up with a few dollars left over for pocket money.
So it's like people aren't trusted to spend their money on their rent?
It just sounds like the payee system.
Well,
You have to have a
people
payee.
can, yeah. Some people can have it that way.
Yeah, and it
all
just
the
sounds like basically a payee, but a professional. Somebody else is setting it up and paying to get what little's left or whatever.
Yeah, there is cases like that where I know of people where that's how it is. They just can't look after their own money whatsoever. So the government trustee gives them a little bit of money. All their rent and everything is paid. All the utilities is paid through their money, but they don't get it.
Yeah. I have a kind of similar thing, though. The person who's my payee, I actually live with and can interact with, so it works much better for making sure all needs are met. But yeah, I have a similar thing, and it's not because I couldn't handle money, it's because I wasn't going to fight it. And my being on disability is due to mental issues, mostly emotional, not like intellectual, but they just weren't comfortable with the idea of maybe managing my own money, so I'm not even supposed to touch that account.
You could be going to buy drugs or something.
I don't know how I feel about that. Because a lot of, emotional issues, you can handle your own money.
Yeah, I'm allowed to have my own money if I get it any other way. It's just the money that's coming in from the government is going to a payee. And, yeah. Which, I mean, like I said, I haven't had a problem with it because it can be somebody you know. And it can be changed. Though last time when we changed it from my mom to my wife, my mom had to sign off on it, especially since we're not like legally married or anything. So I would theoretically have to get her to sign off on it or have a hassle to get it moved, but it can be done. So if somebody's like trying to abuse it, there are methods, but yeah, it does leave that opening for issues.
Right.
Somebody in the chat just said my voice is a bit too soft.
Yeah, it is. Like, it's
Quiet
weird
the whole
because I was able to hear you pretty solidly before, like when you first got on, but like now it's definitely a lot quieter.
I can talk right next to the mic if that helps.
It probably will. Let me see if I can do something from the control room to, I should be able to. Can you talk right now?
Yes, I can talk right now.
I can hear you better. I don't know if everyone else can. Okay. I'm definitely going to need to, like, I'm not used to doing group, like, Google Hangouts on my own channel, so this is a learning experience for me too, guys.
You're fine. I still haven't done a single live thing on my own channel.
I think that's understandable.
Which you need to.
Oh, looks like I'm going to be as soon as I hit 500.
Oh, that's
really?
exciting.
You're going to? I definitely want to be there. Oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah, I was asking people what I should do for hitting 500. It's like I gave a couple options and then a thing to put other things, and one person clicked it but didn't actually put another idea. A couple people hit nothing. The majority of people are saying I should do an open hangout.
I hit 250 and I still need to film my Q&A, but also like every day for the last couple of weeks, I've gotten at least one new subscriber, including today. So I'm less than 25 people away from 300.
Nice.
I don't grow regularly.
I'd grow more
I've been
regularly
losing
if I'd actually
people
post.
lately.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm hard to love.
Oh, that's not true.
We love you. What are you about?
I'm going to start to wrap up this show because I wanted to keep it going until 9:30, and I put until 10 just to be ambitious, and then we all ended up having like a grand old time. So.
Well, yeah.
But yeah.
I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the invite.
Oh yes, thank you.
I have a lot of fun with this. I think that I'm going to work on getting better at group chats, and I'm going to make this a more common thing, especially because I like politics and policy is definitely something that I'm like super into. So this is an easy topic for me to get like to actually enjoy myself talking about, because this is like, I talk about peace and conflict studies, which I like, but like I get a little bit nervous, especially because people don't really care unless there are other people in my field and I have to make them care. But then about this, people are like, yeah, we want to know more.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just glad you're doing it. Because, I don't know. I feel like through you, at least I can get an idea of what's going on.
It's amazing what people don't know about what's going on.
Yeah.
Right now,
Well, I mean, people are busy with their lives frequently.
I'm a child. I really am. I just, too much is going on right now, and I feel like I'm self-destructing with the whole news and
I don't know how people keep up with everything, to be honest.
It is really hard, and it's also like kind of destructive. Like I noticed that a lot of people who pay a whole lot of attention to like news and stuff, like it wears on your mental health, and that's really disturbing in and of itself, that just being aware of what's going on in the world has like a negative impact on your mental state.
Well, probably has to do with the fact that pretty much all news that actually gets broadcast is like negative things. You don't get a whole lot of the good news stories of the person who did this good thing for somebody else, or who saved that person, or the cat rescued from the tree, or whatever. You get mostly.
That's how it's always been with. That's how it's always been with news. It's never.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that's probably part of why it ends up so like negative, has such a negative impact on people, because you're spending your time focusing on bad things, and what you focus on, your mind will like exaggerate and think is more common than it is. So yeah, because we have a 24-hour news cycle. If you're keeping up with the news, you're basically never doing anything else.
well, let's hope for some good news soon. But I do think it's time to impeach. And I know Pence is frightening and everything, but I'm hoping for getting rid of this administration in 2020.
About time a woman became president, you reckon?
It would be nice if we had a woman president, as long as that president's good, but
I'm
any
not gonna vote
president's
for.
better.
Yeah, I'm not gonna vote for a woman just because she's a woman, though.
No.
I'm really, like, I am a screaming feminist, but I do not want to put anyone in that position who shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's historic. I want the right person. I want to vote for my best interests. I don't care if they're a man or a woman or a house cat.
Well,
Very well
house cat would be an improvement.
Very well educated house cat.
I'd rather have a house cat than Trump. I don't.
Fair.
House cat would be an improvement.
Well, it might do better on the global stage. Like, here's the house cat. Pet the house cat. The house cat is very nice. Oh, the house cat's not going to tweet at you and say that you're a loser. The house cat isn't going to make arbitrary dandruff or fat jokes. The house cat is just going to be a house cat. We're non-threatening. We purr. Like, that, I think, would be more effective than, oh, and we're winning. Yeah, okay. Yeah, excuse me while I sit in the corner in shame and pretend that I'm not an American. Thanks.
All right, guys. So it's time to. So Wonder Lady and I have a tradition over on the after parties at her channel where we endorse a YouTuber, another content creator. Just to set the president. I'm gonna be cheesy. Also, set the president. I'm gonna set the president here.
President, you're gonna set the president. Yeah, I noticed that earlier too.
The person I'm going to endorse is my fellow podcaster and my girlfriend, Anna, who has a YouTube channel. She has 2 videos up. I think one's gonna be going up during the weekend.
Right.
She's actually not. She's usually in the live streams, at the very least in the comments, but she's not today because she's doing she's at home. She's working on some other stuff. But her over on her channel, she's talked about mental health, and that's going to be a really big topic for her first couple of videos. So in the comments section, when this video is over, before the Leah stream, over where Christy Santiago and Gray Mac are going to be talking about private for-profit prisons later today, I'm going to be sharing, I think, 7 or 8 different links. That's going to be one of them.
Excellent. I'll go first. Please subscribe and follow Mrs. Snarky.
Heck yeah.
She's undersubbed. She's totally undersubbed, and yeah, we love her. So there.
She's awesome.
She is.
Could you repeat that, Terry? I couldn't quite hear you. Is he roboting hard on anyone else's end, or is it just me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's
good.
roboting hard.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, Lady Unicorn, if you don't want to endorse anyone, you don't have to. But if you have someone you want to endorse, you can.
Oh, there's always people. The real question is picking who, and somebody that's not already well known within our little community. But, I've been talking quite off and on with the New Stoics, and I like their channel. They've been doing really good. I like, they're really good information as far as how to do better, reflecting on the day, those kinds of things. It's been really insightful to me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent.
Terry, do you want to endorse anyone?
I'll endorse everyone.
We're all getting endorsed, guys. I was able to hear that.
Yeah, I caught everyone. Even with all the robots.
Oh man, he was he was quiet, but we were able to understand him, and now we can hear him, but I can't make out any part of that.
That happens sometimes, usually due to poor connections.
Oh well, we're gonna go ahead and peace on out. If you watch this stream, oh cool, we can hear you. Dang, I can only understand part of that.
That sounds like that's very good sketch, though. So,
all right.
Till next time,
yeah.
Are you going to be doing this weekly?
I'm not sure if I'm gonna be doing it every single week, but I'm gonna try. This is not I just like live streaming, and I really like politics, so this is a fun thing for me to do. Sorry, Vibrantly, you got here right as it was ending. But yeah, if you have plans to go check out another live stream, or if you have some time later tonight, go check out Leah. Leah is the League of Extraordinary Atheists and Humanists. That's Christy Santiago and Gray Skeptic, and they are doing a live stream in 30 minutes to talk about for-profit prisons. And peace out, guys, and have a lot of fun.
See ya. Bye.